Welcome to the Frontline podcast, brought to you in association with the Atla Group.
So Andrew, thanks for joining me today. I much appreciate your time.
Thank you, Martin, for having me.
Pleasure. So we're gonna dig into entrepreneurship, leadership in a little bit. I think to start with, it might help the audience just to provide a little bit of context to we're sat here on the Isle of Man, how you ended up on the Isle of Man and your background, which I'm sure will provide a good bit of context to the project you're working on. That when we chatted a few weeks ago was a really fascinating project, and I think we've got a lot we can learn from it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I'm originally from Spain. Was born in Barcelona. I am biologist by degree, and then I started to work in multinationals 15 years ago. I worked for Novartis or Terumo in medical devices. And once I went to Terumo, I was promoted at some point and moved to the UK. And I spent in Glasgow a certain amount of years. And then once it was the pandemic stroke, I realized it because I was traveling quite often at the time. And in January, February, was many countries that they were mentioning that there were people dying. And I recall some pandemics that they had this kind of pattern. And we thought with my wife that we should find a place that would be safe. And we tried to find an island. And the closest island that we thought that would be good for traveling in case I need to travel, because I was traveling a lot at that time, and would be responsible with policies is safe. It was the Isle of Man. So we did this long shot. In February, we decided, okay, we are going to move to one of the safest places that end up becoming the Isle of Man. And we moved here on March, April, when the whole pandemic struck. So it was a very stressful time. Nobody knew what was going to happen. We just knew that many people were dying. We had no masks. We had no equipment. We heard horrible things in Italy, thousands of people dying every day in Spain and the UK. So it ended up, for the audience that doesn't know, the Isle of Man was for long months one of the only places where no infection. No one had COVID for a long time in the whole Western world. So it ended up being the right call. And then we realized with my wife that we kind of like it a lot, the lifestyle and the quietness, but also professional network that there is here in the Isle of Man. So we decided to stay, and this is the story. Still here now.
Yeah. So it's interesting because from an outside, when I look at the UK, in many ways it is an island. It's just a lot bigger. So I assume you're looking for something, I suppose, smaller that could be manages risk a little bit better, I guess, at the time.
That's correct. The UK is an island. Sorry about that.
Yeah,
but we were mentioning a way smaller island with a much less population.
Yeah, we obviously look back at, we were really lucky after that first lockdown that no cases then. Life pretty much outside of getting off the Isle of Man was pretty normal.
We were fortunate, yeah.
So the consulting work you did and still do in that area as well is very much from the seat sat here in the Isle of Man at the moment. What kind of, just talk a bit about that consultancy work you're doing at the moment before we get onto the project?
Yes, this started when I decided to leave my former employer. Was at Penumbra at that time. As an executive, I was managing a team of 12 with overseeing the business and cardiovascular surgery, vascular surgery in 25 countries. I decided to leave the end of 2022, the beginning of 2023. And I had in mind an idea, which is the idea that we are going to develop later in the podcast. But in the meanwhile, as I was figuring things out, I decided to use the knowledge of these 15 years in the healthcare industry, especially medical devices. And I set up the business here and started to help some other businesses, startups, consultancies with the commercial strategy know-how I had in this field.
And again, before we talk about your project, when we look at the projects you're consulting with the devices, what typically are they all heart-related devices, or how does that, perhaps give us an example of the type of...
Yes, a type of business. It's one startup in medical devices that are trying to develop the world's first device to detect abnormalities in coronary stents. So they are a spin-off from hospitals and research institutes, universities. So they kind of needed this to complement the know-how in the business with commercial strategy, market access. So what I'm providing them, it's the all this business side of the business, if that makes sense, to keep going and fundraising and keep the company developing. It's a fascinating project because there is no way to anticipate problems with coronary stents, which is what at the end of the day create heart attacks after treatment. So
Okay.
it's fascinating. Yeah.
And obviously, with your background, you know the business itself rather than, like, say, you're looking at strategy and helping them with strategy. You also know the problem they're trying to solve from your background.
Yes, that's correct. We are in a hyper-regulated business, so it's not like you create something you can start selling. You have to know very well which hospitals you want to partner with, even corporations. Do you want to work with possible acquirers? At which point is it strategic to do so? And all this relationship, it's something that I can provide. It's not so easy, straightforward to do it. You have to speak their language. You have to know their motivations. Have to know their the way that they operate, the timings, and it's something that, being in corporate 15 years, it's something that I can really provide. And also the same, I work with large part of the medical institutions in Europe that operate with vascular surgery. They have a department, cardiovascular department, and kind of it's important to know with which hospitals you would to partner with at the beginning, to have the clinical trial, to execute the clinical trial and obtain the clinical results that you want, to partner with the right expertise. Among many other things, you have to do also marketing, communication. People have to know you. You have to have a certain image you want to transmit to your clients or non-clients, the kind of startup that you are, because you normally are not well known. You are not a large company. So all these kind of things, it's.
I imagine our language is important, from the real technical. This is the problem it's fixing, with all the technical language, to I suppose the investor who's more doesn't know that technical detail, and being able to correlate and connect the dots to say putting it, as I would say, plain English.
Yes, absolutely. Well, a startup has three main clients. The first one, it's the doctor, it's not still a client because you are developing the product. It will be your ambassador and hopefully your client once you have the CE mark of the FDA, the approval to commercialize this product. Then the second one is the investors, that they have to understand your business. They have to see you thrive, succeed. You have to create this kind of momentum so they don't want to miss the opportunity. And the third leg, it would be the normal audience, the patients, if you will, or the people who are not precisely directly involved in the project, but you want to create as much as awareness of this project and the disease that you are trying to treat. Also, you want to create this disease awareness, so they also are somehow part of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your project. Let's start with the motive, because when we chatted, I thought it was an interesting backstory that kind of put you on this path, aside from your background and your experience, perhaps some personal experiences that put you down this pathway.
Yes, it was a tough time for everyone. The pandemic 2020, we lost many loved ones. In my case, I lost one of my best friends at a very young age, with 3 kids behind. So I felt from a stroke. So I felt. And a stroke, it's not a reason for someone 37 to die. And Penumbra is well known because it's the company that revolutionized the stroke management therapy back in maybe 15, 20 years back. 20 years back, patients were treated with fibrinolytics, which is a drug that melts down the clot on the brain, and then they are put in the ICU with this drug, and you hope that they are going to recover. So it's a very passive way to treat the disease. Penumbra, among others, 15, 20 years ago, started to say, wouldn't be better that we go from the groin endovascularly up to the brain artery with a catheter, aspirate the clot out of the body, and then you fix the problem, you fix the vessel obstruction, which is the cause of this disease. And that's what we did at Penumbra. We were market leaders for long years of treating proactively this stroke, the stroke patients. So it was quite hard for me to see my best friend die precisely from the disease that my company was treating, and led the path to improve that treatment. So this, together with my dad being diagnosed of also a vascular condition, occlusion in the common carotid, which it won't kill you immediately, but you know that some plaque it's building up in this vessel. It's in the neck. It's the feeder of the brain. So if it's occluded, the more occlusion you have, the higher chances of suffering a stroke as well. And since 2 or 3 years ago, I was running in my head this idea: wouldn't it be amazing, instead of only treating reactively this disease, these vessel occlusions that happen in several areas in the body, wouldn't it be amazing that we know before we are going to have a heart attack or a stroke, that some kind of sensor can tell you, sir, you have this chance of suffering a stroke 1 week from now, 2 days from now, or a heart attack, or a limb amputation. And I believe, I'm not an engineer, I'm a biologist. I don't know so much about the technology, what the technology can do, but I was hearing so much about sensors that can predict this, can predict that. There was the moment where these glucose sensors were becoming very popular for diabetes. Even people without diabetes were using them. So wouldn't it be amazing if someone can create a sensor that can predict vessel occlusion, and therefore we can anticipate stroke or heart attack or limb amputation to happen? So all this was triggered of these personal experiences, and at some point I said, okay, I'm leaving my career. It was really scary because I've never done anything else in my life more than working for corporates. But I said, okay, I think I made the thought, when I'm going to be 70 and my grandchildren are going to ask me, Granddad, what did you do in your professional life, or what was the most important thing that you did professionally? I didn't want to answer them, well, I was an important executive of this company or this other company. I helped them to improve life of patients and also make way much more money than before, right? It didn't sound, nothing wrong with that. And perhaps at some point I will come back to the corporate. But I didn't want this to be me only, that the person that they know professionally only work for other companies, but also try to change the field where I was operating and I was working. So I said,
sense.
I will take the shot.
Yeah, makes sense. So that obviously, you kind of in your brain at that time, you've got this idea do you then start? You mentioned about maybe connections into the US, to start having conversations to build. And I suppose we come on to the entrepreneur bit here. You've got this seed of an idea. How do you then, would love to talk about the journey of bringing that really to where it is today, but that making the connections, I guess, bringing other expertise in, and the challenges you found with that as well.
Yes, no, absolutely. And let's put in advance that 95% of startups will fail at some point for one reason or the other. So what I thought is, okay, I come from big companies. I know nothing about entrepreneurship or small companies, the challenges they face. I assume they might be very, very different. So I thought, okay, first I have to be well prepared. And I applied to Stanford, and some executives in my former company were super supportive with my decision, and they vouched for me. and they write me recommendations to go to Stanford. I was admitted, and I did one that I believe to be the most prestigious course, or the best course to do if you are about to become an entrepreneur in the US, which is the Ignite program in Stanford. Was admitted, and I graduated, and I felt that still I had a lot to learn, but together with this preparation and also knowing that the startup field, it's very hard no matter where you incorporate, I thought that because I created a quite good network with this experience in Stanford, in Palo Alto, San Francisco, Penumbra. My former company was also based and was born in San Francisco area, in Alameda. So I thought that was one of the most powerful hubs in the world to create a company like that per se it's already very, very challenging. And the beginnings, obviously, they were quite, I was quite scared because, I mean, I have this dream and this idea in my head, but it's not like I'm coming out from a university or I have a company backing me. Precisely, I have to do everything from the ground up. So I have to find other people that they believe that this is a good idea, have to talk. I think I called like 20 doctors, surgeons that I knew back in the time, former customers, and say, look, if I were to create this, would you use it? Would you believe it's a good idea? There was still today, it has been over a year now, that no one has told me, don't do this, we don't need this, right? Everyone believed to be a good idea. And then how we execute is another thing. But to predict vascular occlusions, it's something that vascular surgeons, interventional cardiologists, they start to know because they have no way to know. Anyway, okay, good. We have the doctors. The doctors tell me yes, perfect. Actually, I was lucky enough that one of the best customers I had, Professor Bismuth, is the chief of department at Tampa General Hospital, told me, you know what? I wrote a chapter of a book and several articles about remote monitoring, and there is this awareness about this unmet medical need that I'm going to help you. I'm going to co-found IntelVasc with you. And this was, the beginning of the whole story. So I try to minimize risks if you can somehow do that with the risk that you are aware. You don't know what you don't know, but the things that you try to know, you try to minimize them. So in the Bay Area, I thought that was a big network of investors there with engineers, capable engineers, big institutions. You have Stanford, of course, Berkeley University. You have San Diego University, big, well-known because of engineering, LA, UCLA, USC, LA. So there are this hub, Silicon Valley. It's well-known to be one of the best places in the world to create your own company, and that's what they did.
So IntelVasc is the company we talk about in the US.
That's correct.
So let's talk a little bit about the product that you're developing. So I'll somewhat butcher it, and you can go with the detail a bit more. But it's a device that goes within the body, and then the patient, if that's the right term, has a scan system. So perhaps when you've had a vascular event, you'll go back for checkups at certain periods of time. It's important you don't miss those, but I'm sure that happens quite regularly. Yeah. What this device does, once you scan it with the kind of wand, is it provides the data, I suppose, to my basic brain will say to a cloud, and then I guess it can flag earlier signs of perhaps another traumatic event coming up, and you can manage it more efficiently, more proactively than a reactive, which is what you mentioned earlier.
Exactly, Martin.
Can I have a job? Sounds like I was saying no.
You sold it perfectly. Sold it perfectly. And this is the idea, but at the beginning was not everything so clear. There are three ways that we thought that would be possible to scan a vessel, if you will. One, it's with the device outside the body, like a wearable. Another one is implanting something through surgery. The doctor opens and exposes the vessel, and you place the sensor nearby the vessel. And something in the middle that it didn't come up as one of the the first options, but it turned out to be the best option, which is subcutaneous. It goes under the skin. It's minimally invasive. You don't require surgery to do that, but it wipes out many of the issues that has the other options. Of course, at IntelVasc, we have a sensor designed and also filed a patent, not only the subcutaneous, but the three, to use the sensor to monitor vascular occlusions remotely. So we have solutions for the three. But my co-founder, the technical part, Kyle Fredericks, he was the engineering director at Flowsonics. Flowsonics created the world's first ultrasonic sensor, wearable sensor, to detect flow dynamics in the common carotid in the neck.
Okay.
But because the patient's anatomy is so variable, the necks can vary a lot depending on every patient, right? You can have a thinner neck, or if you weigh 300 pounds, your neck is going to be very different. So this sensor is not going to detect the same flow dynamics if you are with one anatomy or another. You have to do a lot of the sensor manipulation. The data is not reliable. So this company finally pivoted to detect, instead of flow dynamics, they use the flow dynamics data to detect sepsis, infection in the blood. So this gave us the indication that, okay, we cannot go this way, the wearable one, which is the best one in terms of it's non-invasive, but the data is not reliable. The number one challenge for our company, like any diagnosis company, it's reliability on the data that you collect. Obviously, the most reliable data you would collect is if you wrap the sensor around the vessel, or you are inside the vessel, then of course the data will be way better. But there is a problem. You put sensor inside the vessel, you are creating, or you have high chances of creating thrombus. This is one of the reasons of vessel occlusion, because there is a fatty plaque or calcium plaque that generates these different flow dynamics that generates thromboneogenesis. So the long story short is, when you have something that is obstructing the vessel from inside, it generates a different kind, not laminar flow, but turbulent flow. This turbulent flow activates the platelets to create thrombus, which is a process called thromboneogenesis. You create new thrombus inside the vessel to try to fix this problem you have there. So if you place a stent, there's very, very frequent place stents there, but they are widely tested for many years, and they are largely safe. But this is one of the risks. If you put something inside the vessel, then you can create this thrombus. So you place a sensor in there, not very good idea. From the outside, well, you are limited that you require surgery. So also, for some cases, could be good, and we have the patent because we believe there are some occasions which is very beneficial, such as a transplant. If you have a liver or kidney transplant, you have already the patient open. You have the open surgery already done. It's not like you are creating an open surgery to insert the sensor.
Yeah, throw it in at the same time.
Exactly. So for our indication, which is peripheral arterial disease, it's a disease that is affecting 33 million patients in the US alone. So it's very frequent. Over 1.3 million patients every year in the US alone are either visited or treated through surgery. And we thought that was one of the biggest markets where we could help the most people. It's a thrombosis that affect the legs. So if you want to place a sensor in the legs, where should you place it? So we believe that, again, we have this variability in size of the legs if the patient is thinner or he's more in weight. So the wearable is not an option. We didn't want to open patients' legs just to monitor if it's not required. So we thought that the minimally invasive sensor through under the skin would be the optimal solution. And in many cases, people, they don't know that. Peripheral arterial disease, when you tell people what it is, probably 80% they will tell you, I don't know. But this is a kind of disease that generates in 5 years, 30% of the population who suffers it will suffer or stroke or heart attack or limb amputation in 5 years. So it's a huge medical problem. $20 billion are spent every year in the US alone to manage this condition, because there are many things that happen from this thrombus in the leg.
Yeah, so that cost is, aside from, I suppose, appointments, checkup, it's surgeries, it's medical care, that type of thing.
Absolutely. I mean, if you have a major vascular event because of peripheral arterial disease, yes, this will end up being endovascular surgery or even open surgery.
And you mentioned, or I think I read the stats then, that there's a follow-up event after the first event. Statistically, it's very high or relatively high.
It's a chronic condition, Martin. So you have to follow it for life.
Okay.
You will always have this disease, this condition. That's what some people they don't know. Even the people that they are also suffering it, because they don't fully understand. We have to do much more work in peripheral arterial disease awareness. Not only peripheral arterial disease, all peripheral vascular disease. It's way underestimated. The disease that we have in the veins, they are largely underdiagnosed as well. That can end up in a pulmonary embolism, which more and more people are starting to hear this term. But 5 years ago, 90% of people, they wouldn't know what it is. And this disease kills people, actually.
And before we get into maybe just how that sensor works, the cause of these diseases, lifestyle choices, genes, mixture of everything, why does that?
Yep, no, I think that you nailed it. It's a mixture of everything. There are genetic components. I mean, at the end of the day, it's thrombus in veins or arteries. There are like 7 or 8 reasons, if not more, why an artery can be thrombosed, and these reasons are genetic or lifestyle, as you said, or maybe another condition that it's triggering this one, malformations that maybe you didn't born with this malformation in this artery, but after you grow up, for X reason, you have this instead a straight artery, a narrowed artery that is generating this flow dynamics that generate thrombus. There are several reasons to it. Cardiovascular disease is the #1 cause of death worldwide, right? And vascular occlusion, it's one of the main components of it. So it's really a large problem.
So we think, just to go back to the sensor's placed under the skin through, I suppose, a local anaesthetic, I assume. Then you scan on the website, if you look like a wand over it, so is that device is taking some kind of imagery, describe what that imagery is, and then how it suddenly appears in the cloud. Yeah. And then I guess over time you'll build some systems in where you become traffic lighted, and if things have changed too dramatically, you'll get the call quicker.
Yes, very well described. So our solution is a sensor that goes near the vessel, and this is, as you said, local anesthesia, 2 minutes procedure. We haven't invented this subcutaneous sensor. There are other subcutaneous sensors. For instance, the loop recorders are subcutaneous sensors. They go in the chest, and they monitor remotely arrhythmias. So we took this concept into the vascular disease. Instead of detecting arrhythmias, we are detecting vessel occlusion. So it's placed there in outpatient setting. You don't require surgery. 2 minutes procedure, local anesthesia. The sensor is placed, then the patient receives a wand, as you said, and a scanner, and the doctor will prescribe the amount of time, the frequency of scannings that is required. You also mentioned at some point that there is certain follow-up visits after a patient is diagnosed of this disease. This is correct. The first year after an intervention, the doctor would monitor or would call in the patient for a medical checkup the first month, 3, 6, and 12 months. There are some variations, but generally the clinical guidelines, they go among these lines. And then after the first year, it's once a year checkup. 90%, up to 90% of these patients are symptomatic. So this is one of the dangers. Most of the patients, then they don't come to the clinical checkup. So with this WANT, we are trying to create more proactive action to this disease. The fact that the patient receives a tool that has to use guide with the phone app, we believe it will increase a lot the adherence to the treatment. Together with the drugs after this disease, of course, the doctor will prescribe certain drugs that the patient has to get, different changes in lifestyle and everything. We believe that our treatment, because it's active, it's going to promote this increase in the disease awareness and the adherence of the treatment. So yes, it has to scan at the beginning, maybe once a day, and then it will end up being once a week, once every 2 weeks. But the important thing is we will cut the vessel occlusion on time, because the doctor will see, as you said, this reading will go to a cloud where our machine learning algorithms and eventually AI algorithms are going to process this data. Won't generate an image because we don't need it. We only need a percentage of vessel occlusion. If the doctor can receive then from this cloud, we'll go to a clinical dashboard where the doctor is going to check, okay, this list of patients, they are doing well. This patient, apparently it's reaching a certain threshold. We'll put, for instance, 70% of occlusion, 50% of occlusion, trigger an alarm for the doctor and the patient to know.
And for the patient, you're saying because they're asymptomatic, they may not know that they wouldn't know that percentage is decreasing until either they get that checkup maybe 6 months down the road, or there's another event.
Yes, exactly. So most of the vascular events are emergencies. That means that they don't cut in time because it can happen every time during this year of the clinical checkup, and without any symptom, they will have this other second event. Yeah.
Do you ever envisage the device where the device is going within people who've had that experience, the bad experience? Do you ever envisage somewhere further down the road the device just installed by people who want to monitor it and keep on top of it before that first major event? Is that something longer term?
Well, now it's a shot to the moon, and probably there is no technology to that. But my idea is that we can have this scanner that people can check, IntelVasc.com. This scanner, instead of having a sensor in the body, at some point the technology advances enough that only with this tricorder from
Scan yourself at home.
Scan yourself at home. It gives you all sorts of parameters that can keep yourself healthy and aware of your health. This is something that definitely I'm not the only one thinking about it. There are many companies trying to develop devices like this. But yeah.
You mentioned about the scanning, I suppose empowering the patient as part of that process you'd think would get more engagement and therefore interest. But I think about the development of wearable watches where not everyone's cup of tea, but a lot of people want that data and information. So if you can provide that data more and more, people are going to take more interest in it, and by default are going to be more proactive in their
or the ring, right? Have you seen
the Oura ring?
All these rings that are giving you so much information. Definitely a wearable where you don't have to do anything. It's very appealing. The fact that you don't have to keep reminding yourself, I have to scan this or I have to do that with this device. It would increase a lot the engagement and the amount of data that we could generate. So it's something that definitely it's up to the future. But in vascular occlusion, let's say, I wouldn't go today so far. We want to reach there, but today there is nothing. So we'd rather prefer to have a device that can provide reliable data, and this is the number one. With all the problems around the patient engagement and everything about the technology, but if we can create something that provides consistent, reliable data for monitoring vascular occlusion, we would have done a huge leap to manage this condition. And then, of course, all from there, IntelVasc has all the ideas and projects to develop this to create a more, if you want, patient-friendly tool to improve on that. Yes.
So we go back to the entrepreneurship. We know the kind of the setup, the device you're looking and the systems that you're looking to develop. You're now at that phase where you're still building your network, you're trying to get seed investment. And again, those challenges, what are you seeing as those challenges as aside from probably needing 37 hours a day to get through all the work? What are those challenges you're seeing, and maybe advice to people who, like we say at the start, 95% of startups fail, so it's easy to not bother, but very honorably, you're doing something not necessarily for the financial reward here. This is about arguably changing lives of millions and millions of people.
Yes, no, I believe that because 95% of startups fail, we need more and more brave entrepreneurs to create crazy ideas that they have validated first. If we talk about the medical field, that they have first validated with surgeons in this example, or clinicians, to make sure first that the idea that they have, the product they want to bring to the market, the hospital wants to pay, or the payer, or whoever is the payer, if it's Medicare or the insurance company, the doctor needs it and wants to use it.
So just to pick up there, where you think about entrepreneurs, I guess it's important when you're developing something that you're talking really the end customer. Is there an end customer? It might be the greatest product in the world, but if nobody wants it,
yes,
it's not the greatest product in the world.
The worst thing that can happen is an entrepreneur to fall in love with their products, right? Mm-hmm. So it's not like, and it's very easy. If you are an engineer, you can create things. You believe you have created this great technology, and you try to fit this technology inside of any market, and trying to find a market. From my perspective, it should be the other way around. And here, the biodesign from Stanford, the organization of biodesign, it's helping entrepreneurs amazingly, is to have this kind of mindset first. Try to find the unmet medical need. Try to validate it with customers. That customers are not always the doctors. The doctors will be the end users, but the payers as well. And that can be, again, Medicare or hospitals, insurance companies. Once you have this validation, pursue the technology and try to build the best technology for this. And you will have to pivot several times. I never met any company that got the product the first attempt, including us. So this is one component to fundraise, coming back to your question, fundraising. Second thing, when I started, it was 2023. So it was this time that the VCs or angels were not investing so highly. It was a reduced number of institutions or investment overall. So the feedback I've got is, oh, you are crazy because you are starting a company now because no one is investing. Well, it's like real estate or stock market, right? If anyone, if no one is investing now, probably the wave is going to change. And when I need investment in a couple of years, more people will start to invest, right? And that's what we are seeing today, a dramatic increase of investment in medical devices. Now, medical devices is a hard business because now we are in a AI era. With a couple of million, two guys, software engineers, we can create something really necessary for medicine. With very low investment, you can get high return. So for medical devices, even though we are using also AI component here in our sensor, it's way less appealing because you need much more investment. You need a regulatory process to go through. Either you are class 2 or even class 3. You will require clinical trials. You are not going to spend less than 30, 40 million on the whole project, right? And then the return, they might think that it gets lower, and the lifespan of the project also is larger, right? Mm-hmm. It's just longer. It's 5, 6, 7, 8, years, whilst an AI company can get sold in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So it's tough time today. It's not very appealing. It's coming back little by little, but certainly fundraising, it's not a very easy process for anyone, and it's getting harder. So I was told. So for us, we are very hopeful because we received a lot of interest from angels, institutions. We are in collaboration with Mayo Clinic, that they would eventually join us in our seed fundraising now. We have a lot of interest shown by Royal Philips, which is, if not the leader, one of the leaders in ultrasound in the world. They many of the hybrid rooms or operatory rooms are built by Philips. So they have been not a competitor as I was in my field, but a companion because they offered many of the tools and technology that is required for surgery. So we are being followed by them. There's a chance that they are going to join us in our animal labs for clinical validation in the next couple of months. And we have been invited also in the most prestigious conference in vascular surgery, which is the BIF Symposium in November in New York, happening every year. So definitely, we have generated a huge expectation. Also, we have received in our short time as a company a couple of awards. So it's really, the interest is there. There are people willing to invest at IntelVasc. We are halfway of our seed round, so I just encourage anyone who wants to join the round to get in touch with me so they can learn a little bit more. But it's definitely a journey. It takes time, and you have to be a very resilient person as CEO. You have, as I think Elon Musk mentioned one day, you have all the distillation of the worst problems that you, in a company that you don't want to take care of, you have to. Fundraising, at some point, it's one of them. But yeah, it's also very interesting to receive a lot of feedback from third parties that they not necessarily are inside the medical device space.
That resilience side then, and you perhaps always end up dealing with as the CEO the problem sides of things, and then let's bring in the work-life balance. I'm sure you're a very, very busy person. How do you balance that all and keep the vision that there's an end goal here without perhaps getting swamped by it all together? There's just too much to handle here.
Yes, well, I always like to work hard, right? It's one of my passions. I don't have kids, unfortunately, so I use IntelVasc as my own kid, because it is my own kid in many ways, in many aspects, right? Many nights that you cannot sleep and you are worried about its health, and you have to be everywhere to try to find the funds to make him raise healthy, right? So it's very easy to lose sight of your own health or lifestyle and all the things that you need. So it's easy to forget about you and put everything in the project that you are so passionate about. So for these entrepreneurs that or executives, I've been there as well, that they are so passionate about the projects that they are doing, and they forget a little bit about their lifestyle. What I would say is the number one, say you put the mask you first, and then you put the mask to the kids, right? So you have to be self-aware of your own needs. Not always is possible, but you have to be very careful of what you eat, very aware of how much you sleep and the quality of your sleep. You have to be well rested, even though you don't have time to rest, because if you don't rest well, you eat poorly and you don't exercise, then your mood, and I felt in my own, in certain periods of time I couldn't do that, you are much more negative. It's way harder to keep your own team motivated, and also you're balancing in your household, if you are married or you have a relationship with someone. It's very important. Or even you are fundraising, you are destroyed, you are so tired. The first question, but this sensor would generate this, or this is not needed because of that. You will get irritated instead of answering well the question, right? Because there are many aspects in life that you have to put your own shoes on somewhere else's and understand where this question is coming from. You are well rested, then you are much better equipped to manage also challenges, your own challenges inside your organization as it's growing. People's conflicts can emerge, so you have to also be, calm and well rested to manage these challenges and a very long list.
Just another dynamic of trying to run a startup.
This is correct. And so what I would say, it's working hard, yes, but also being smart. You cannot be everywhere. At the beginning, you have many hats. I had the hat of the CEO, also the COO and the CFO, right? But as the time passes and you fundraise and you have to find the right partners with you. We started, because we are not a spin-off, we started with very humble beginnings. I mean, it was my own idea, my own investment, and try to convince others to join the project, to be generous with their time and also their resources. So you have to be creative, because you don't have enough resources to hire a CFO for $800,000 means that you have to do everything. Right, you have to surround the right people. You have to find the good partners, and be aware that I'm not the best in finances. So if I have to do a little bit of them, who can help me with the amount of resources that I have? So it's also you have to be very humble and self-aware that you cannot do everything.
Absolutely.
And you have to give ball to other members of the team and try to find them and motivate them, encourage them, and attract them to your project. So it's a lot of that.
And maybe just to finish off, the device itself, the development, you have to go through FDA approval. What's the hoped timeline as we sit here today in March, April 2024?
Yes. So the roadmap would be a couple of years for clinical tests with animals or on cadaveric tests as well. Development of the product, couple of years. So we'd be facing in 2026 that we have a freezed MVP that works to start clinical trials. So then we'll have to have conversation with the FDA to see we apparently fall under the class 2, and we could fall under the 510K with the predicate. If this is the case, we have to see what the FDA wants to collect from data from us, if we need to do a clinical trial or not. But anyway, even if we don't need a clinical trial for a 510K, you need to make clinical trials post-approval to provide data that can demonstrate that your device is doing what you are. So
clinical trials, people willing to use the device or have the device inserted and then report on the data. And
this is correct. This
report reactions to that off the patient.
Yes, this is pretty standard for. It's basically for safety, more than for efficacy. The safety, it's it's paramount. It's the most important thing to show that your device is not creating infection or doesn't create side effects or reactions. But because again, we are using standard products and we are following other products that they are inserted as well. They are working very well and they are popular in the vascular surgery today. We are quite certain that we can follow this path as well, but we have to prove it. And we expect to have the product in the market in the end of 2027, beginning of 2028, starting our first sales.
Right, amazing. Like I said at the start, we chatted a few weeks ago, and I just thought it is a really interesting project. The motivation and the reasoning's very honourable as well. And it's obviously the potential, and I'm sure it will work, is to change people's lives for the better. So I appreciate your time, Andrew. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you, Martin. I really enjoy our conversation today.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening, everyone.